Eyes wide open.
If you think Dogman is just a legend, keep watching. From shadowy figures stalking rural backroads, from towering wolf-like creatures emerging from the tree line, these sightings have left witnesses shaken, speechless, and forever changed. If you've ever wondered what really growls in the wilderness after sunset, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe, and let's take a look.
So what can you tell us about the Dogman?
What do you want to know?
Ancient folk tales to modern-day eyewitnesses. Whatever the Dogman's true nature, its legacy is starkly represented in both the cryptozoological and supernatural realms, even if only in thought.
Just, kind of what is it?
It's flesh and blood. I know that.
Right.
More of them than you realize around. A lot of people think that they're mean, which I'm not saying some of them aren't, but they had many opportunities to take me out or hurt me, and they never did.
So you've seen one?
I've seen several. Check out the hands. We were fortunate or misfortunate, whatever you want to call it. There's a certain campground not too far from here where they're just prolific down there. And we stumbled upon them. We stuck a camera out one night, a video camera, just to record audio, because we kept hearing the grass man.
Dogman.mp3.
And you hear that, oh my God, it is just instantly.
Yeah.
Just the fear, your heart starts beating.
Yeah.
And you get up in there in the woods about 3 a.m. and you start seeing their silhouettes going between the trees, and you hear them growling. You can see he's in motion. That one is terrifying.
So I have weird thoughts on a lot of this stuff. And I think that if you see a Dogman, it doesn't mean that Dogman was born here. It doesn't mean that it wasn't. It doesn't mean, here's the thing. It could have been born here. It could have been created in a lab. I think it could have been coming from another realm. But one thing that it isn't friendly. You're not going to play games with it.
Simply speaking with those who have seen the thing for themselves makes it clear that it extends far beyond flesh and blood. One might argue that the truth of any strange phenomena is subjective, and the arguments in favor of both the biological Dogman and his supernatural doppelganger are not exempt from this rule. What this ultimately means is that the central piece of evidence in the search for Dogman, as well as the central question, are at odds with one another. The question is of supernatural versus flesh and blood, and the focal piece of evidence is the eyewitness testimony. And for every encounter that supports the idea of a biological animal, there exists another that implies a far stranger conclusion.
That first shot, I rang its bell. I went out to go turn it off, and of course it's after dark. And I catch the smell. The wind was coming from the south, and I smell rotten meat and stale dog urine, which kind of goes hand in hand with every time I saw this one. So I know it's out there. I turned the flashlight on. At this point in time, I didn't know what was working, so I had opted for just a standard AR-15, 5.56, but I alternated the rounds in the magazine. So I had your standard full metal jacket, your steel core green tips, ballistic hunting ammunition, as well as hollow points, thinking, okay, one of these is going to stick. At the same time, I kind of decided to use a different thought process on these things, considering shooting it in the chest and the head didn't seem to work. I figured maybe it's like a pig and has extremely dense bone structure in that area. And so therefore, unless you have something that will actually penetrate armor, you're not going to get through it. So I decided that if it came down to it, I was going to aim for soft tissue, basically neck or abdomen. So it wouldn't be a quick kill, but it would at least slow it down. This thing, like I said, I turned the flashlight on. I was looking around, saw it. It was on all fours. It stood up. It charged towards me. I don't know if it was trying to bluff charge me or if it was actually trying to charge me. As it was doing it, I took a couple of steps forward and dropped down to a shooter stance on one knee. At that point, it just kind of stopped. I could see very clearly that it was a male. They have very much the same anatomy as a dog does as far as that area goes. I had my target. That first shot, I rang its bell. It hit the ground. It was rolling, thrashing, making the most god-awful screaming noise, basically, as you could imagine. I put several more rounds into it, aiming for the abdomen and the neck. After hitting it several more times, it got up on all fours and it took off away from me. I fired 2 more times, aiming for Main Street. And that happened on a Thursday or a Friday. But either way, I never saw that one again. So it's kind of one of those things of like, this is new, but it was terrifying to look at, because here I am looking at something that, shouldn't be real. There should not be things that look like werewolves out there. I know the mythology and everything else, that all of it has to come from somewhere, but seeing something that takes that many shots from a round that will drop a bear, that's worrisome. Shouldn't be an issue with dropping majority of anything in North Texas with that round. And yeah, I really didn't want to be walking around after dark without a gun. Heck, I didn't want to walk around in daylight without a gun.
Do I believe in the Dogman? I believe in the paranormal? Yes, absolutely. And I have a very healthy respect for it all. Which is why you rarely hear me have any stories about ghosts or demons on this channel. Frankly, I'm afraid of them. So when the reports of Dogman sightings came in from Taylor, Mississippi, and I found out that there was actual TV news footage talking about the problems that the people in Taylor were having, I jumped at the opportunity to talk with Skip, the lineman in the story. To give you some background, Skip is a friend of a friend. A guy named David Dunbar, who I've known for a few years, contacted me when he subscribed to the Dark Waters channel. David and Skip go back 20 years. So in my mind, it was all good. I trust David. David trusts Skip. It was a real simple solution to the problem. I can talk to Skip. So Skip and I had a Skype conversation when it was time to talk about his experience. He presented it. We went back and forth, and I had many questions. In that Skype conversation, Skip left an invitation for me to come to Oxford, Mississippi, then travel to Taylor, Mississippi with him right before sundown. My encounter starts with that invitation. Like I said, I was not a true Dogman believer. I acknowledge that people are having encounters with something, but I have to see these things for myself. So I left on a Friday, headed to Oxford, Mississippi, and 5 cigars later, I was checking into the Super 8 motel. Yes, this is a low-budget operation, more of a micro-budget type thing going on right here. I checked the mattress on the bed for bugs, looked under the bed for dead bodies, and went straight to sleep. I was meeting Skip for breakfast that next morning, so I needed some rest. We met that morning at a place called Big Bad Breakfast. He was a few minutes late, but nothing to be upset about. I was excited and was on my 3rd cup of coffee by the time he arrived. We talked and talked, ate breakfast, and at first the conversation was kind of slow. You see, Skip is a northern Mississippi boy, and I'm more of a city boy from New Orleans. So it took a little time for he and I to gel. However, once we started talking about the Dark Waters channel, Skip really opened up. He wanted to know about many of the encounters that I have on the channel, and he wanted inside baseball on how I met these people. 20 minutes later, Skip and I were sitting there laughing like old childhood friends. And things were going well until the conversation pivoted towards his Dogman encounter and how we were going to visit the site. Skip's body language immediately changed. He started to get real tense, and he kind of clammed up, and I asked him, I said, "Are you okay?" He strained through his teeth saying yes, and we set a time for us to meet later that evening. I returned to the Motel 8, talked to my girlfriend on the phone, watched a little TV, and took a nap. We were supposed to be meeting at 3:45. Skip arrived at 4 o'clock, and we started the 15-minute ride down to Taylor, Mississippi. Old Taylor Road is a 2-lane highway, 1 lane going north, 1 lane going south. This roadway is kind of spooky in the daytime, so I can imagine how it was at night for him. the trees and bushes kind of overhang to the side of the road to the point to where if you stuck your hand out the window, you can actually touch one of the tree branches. We rode along the roadway very slowly, and it was pretty much no traffic. The only thing that passed us was a funeral procession. And in true Mississippi tradition, we pulled to the side of the road and let the funeral procession pass, paying our respects to the dead. We talked as we rode down the road, and we even stopped at private properties where people had recently had Dogman experiences. We didn't go in and talk to anyone, but we stopped and looked over the property. Right at about 5:45, we made our way to the section of road in which he had his encounter. To describe it, at this point, there's a slight bend in the road as it makes a sharp curve about 200 to 300 yards up ahead. We stood there in the middle of the road talking about his experience and him telling me about some other things that he heard about that happened down at Sardis Lake. The sun was starting to go down behind the trees, and it was just starting to get dark. Now, guys, Dark Waters, I am not an outdoorsman at all. The most I do in the woods is go to the gun range with my friends who are Marines and kind of fire a few rounds down range. But as far as hanging out in the woods, that's not something that I do. However, my senses are very acute, and I like to believe that I have a very, very, very good radar when it comes to danger. Standing there in the road as the sun started going down, I did start feeling that it was a dangerous situation, but nothing had happened that really made me nervous thus far. We stood there talking, and I watched the sun fall behind the trees. Skip was talking a little bit more about his encounter as the sun set behind the trees and it turned dark. I don't believe that Skip noticed that everything had gone quiet. Prior to things going silent, the area was very lively. There were crows on the power lines squawking. There was a dog in the background. You could hear him barking a ways off. And just the normal sounds of the forest. But things went deadly quiet. When I say quiet, deadly quiet. Almost like in a vacuum. Skip didn't seem to notice it at first. He just kept talking and talking and talking. Up on the power lines were two black crows. Could barely still see them as the sun set behind the trees and it got dark. They just sat there staring off into the woods, almost like they were looking at something. Looking up at the birds, I got an ominous feeling. I turned my attention back to Skip to continue to listen to what he was saying. That's when the two crows took off flying away, squawking like they were crazy, almost as if to warn us that something was coming our way. By now, Skip was feeling it too, because he started backing away and moving towards the truck. That's when we heard it. The sounds of something running through the brush. And when I say the sound of something running through the brush, when we initially heard it, it had to be far away, but it was loud. Skip called it. He said, "They're coming. They're headed our way." I said, "What's headed our way?" "They're headed our way." He quickly started walking back towards the truck as the sound got louder and louder. Now, to describe this sound, guys, I have a cousin who played professional football in the NFL, and I've been to the combine. One of the most interesting things about being at the NFL combine is to watch the linemen run, because these guys are big 300, 400-pound men who run the 40-yard dash in like 5.5 and 5.1 seconds. But as they run, their feet make a tremendous amount of noise as they run. The sound that I was hearing was the sound of maybe 4 or 5 of those NFL offensive linemen running through the leaves of the woods, but it was far off. It still was loud. Skip quickly walked back to the truck, positioning himself inside the driver's side door, 1 foot on the ground, 1 foot in the truck. The sound was coming towards that driver's side, so I circled around to the passenger side, opened the door, and stood there. Looking back, I should have put 1 foot in the truck like he did, but I didn't. The sounds got louder and louder and louder. You could hear limbs and branches breaking. No breathing, no nothing, but we knew something was coming. Skip started to call a distance. 300 yards away, we could hear the sounds. 150. What I hadn't noticed was that he left the truck running the entire time we were there. 100 yards, 50, the sound stopped. Skip looked over the truck at me and said, "You need to get in." Just as I started to put my foot in the open door, we heard the howl. Now, Now, again, like I said, I'm not an outdoorsman, so I can't 100% say that this wasn't a pig or it wasn't something else, but this sounded like a howl of a werewolf on the Sci-Fi Channel. It was loud and it was powerful, and it actually scared the shit out of me. I stood there frozen. My brain wanted me to get in the truck. It told me to hop in the truck and get in, but I was frozen. I stood there, guys. I stood there staring directly into the woods. It was almost like the sound made my nervous system reset, and the signal wasn't going from my brain to my body to move. So I stood there. To be honest with you, I'd never been that afraid in my life. I've never been in a situation where I panicked and just could not move. As I stood there, I saw the truck pulling off out my peripheral vision. Out the corner of my eye, I could see Skip speeding down the road with the passenger door still wide open. Within seconds, he rounded that curve and was out of sight. Now, I'm standing alone in the dark on the opposite side of the road from whatever these creatures are, with nothing there but space and opportunity. For those of you who don't know, Satori is a time when your mind, body, and spirit all are one. Athletes experience this, and people who are in danger experience it as well. It's a sensation of time slowing down. That is exactly what I was caught in. Satori is something I'm very familiar with from being a bodybuilder. However, this time I was unable to take advantage of it. Time was going slow, and I was standing there. It felt like forever as I stood there staring across the road, wondering if something was coming out of those bushes. Now, I'm a big guy. I've had a few too many hamburgers in my life at this point in time. So running is not an option. I know this. My brain told me that we can't run. I looked down the road to see how far Skip had gone, and his taillights were no longer in view. He had clearly made that turn. So I was alone, standing on the opposite side of the road from what I assume is a Dogman. I did not see it, but I heard it. I heard the howl, and I heard it coming through the bushes. Standing there was nothing for me to do, so I raised my fist as if punching the Dogman was going to be an option. But what am I supposed to do? Time passed, and I couldn't tell you how long it was, and I started to hear the sound of the pickup truck screeching to a halt. In the back of my mind, I was like, good. Skip has figured out that I'm not in the truck. And then I heard the tires squealing as the truck turned around, and I could hear the engine revving as he was coming back towards me. The headlights from the truck lit up the street and the brush across from me, and something big and black moved from left to right. Skip slammed on the brakes, stopping the truck right in front of me, yelling, "Get in, get in." But I wasn't going around to the passenger side. I hopped into the bed of the truck, and he pulled off. The conversation that happened after that was very, very heated. I was pissed that he left me. He was pissed that I was chicken enough to stand there while he left me. We argued back and forth for a few minutes, and then actually we started laughing because both of us were scared out of our mind. When we got back to my motel room, we just sat there and had drinks. And I told him, I said, man, I'm not sure what that was. He said it was the Dogman. You heard the howl. You heard it coming through the bushes. I told him I didn't see it, though. He said, did you want to see it? I really pondered this question for a few minutes before I answered. Truth is, I don't think I really wanted to see what that was. Based on what I heard, the little flash of blackness that I saw, and the size of the whatever it was moving from left to right, I don't think I ever want to see a Dogman. Ever in my life. Okay, guys, so that was my Dogman experience that I had out in Taylor, Mississippi with Skip. Just to give you guys a little inside baseball and let you kind of know a little bit more about what happened. I'm never going there again. Like, that experience kind of made me question the whole visiting a site of incidents that people claim have happened. Did I expect something to be there? Yes, I did. But did I expect something to come running through the bushes sounding like the refrigerator Perry, knocking over trees? No, I did not. And it's kind of difficult to explain to you guys the sound of the howl. It's very, very difficult to explain what it does to your body physically. I've watched some Dogman videos where they talk about infrasound and growls and roars and what they do to you. It freezes you. It's almost like getting hit in the back of the head with a stick, and you're foggy is the best way to describe it. And when I say to you guys who listen to this channel who say, hey, I want to go out and go look for the Dogman, I would say don't. I would say leave that alone. I'd rather see you go ghost hunting or exercise a demon or go skydiving or deep sea spear fishing and looking for giant octopuses than going out and messing with this Dogman. Because I can imagine that had something stepped out of those bushes within that probably 2-minute time span that Skip was away from me, it could have easily came across, killed me, and drug me off, and he would have never found me. So I just want you guys to be careful. It's not all fun and games.
Right before it got to the edge of the field, it went from all fours to 2 legs. It stood up. And it wrapped its hand around the tree, and I was like, my tree started shaking probably because I was scared. I didn't know what it was. It was big, it was black, and it looked my way, and it checked the air like a coyote would or a deer would for danger, and started looking around. And here I am. I got a shotgun in my lap. I got a sidearm. I always carry a pistol on my side. And I was surprised it didn't see me or hear me, because I'm sure that tree was shaking. I was scared. It looked around the surroundings, and I didn't look it in the eye. I was always told to, when you're hunting, you don't look your prey in the eye, or you don't look a predator in the eye. So I was watching it, but I was not looking directly into its eyes. And after, I'd say about 25, 30 seconds, maybe a little bit longer, it went down to all fours and ran across the cornfield.
This one sounds not even bizarre. It just sounds like I'm crazy. So if anybody has answers as to what I seen, let me know in the comments. So we would stay at my great-grandmother's house. That was huge property, by the way, like huge. And it was a family reunion. We were the first ones to get there that night. And in the room that we stayed in was a huge, huge room. It was able to fit 3 beds, 3 queen beds, and a wardrobe in the corner, and like our suitcases. It was a really big room. In that big room is a door that has like, if you've been to Mexico, you know what I'm talking about. It's like the windows that are blurry that are usually found in like shower doors. So like you could see like figures on the other side. It's just that it's like not clear. So this door had that window, and that door lets you use like a smaller room. So I slept on a bed with my younger sister. Keep in mind, I'm 3. So my sister has to be like 1.5, maybe 2. Which is the furthest one away from the door. It's like the very corner. Next to us is another queen bed, and that's my parents. And then across from us is another bed on the corner by that door, and it's my older sister. She's sleeping by herself on that bed. Now, this is where it gets a little crazy, so stick. I woke up in the middle of the night to tapping sounds. I remember sitting up in my bed and looking around the room like, what is that? And everybody was sleeping. My dad's snoring. Like, everybody's knocked out. All the lights are off. The only light that is in the room is the moonlight. There is a window in that big room, and it's like, I remember it being so high, and the moonlight is casting in. Now, on the other side of that little small room is also a window on the same side of the wall, and you can see the moonlight also casting in that other side of the room because it's bright in there. So I remember looking into that door, that at least a little small room, right? I saw this hairy dog-shaped man. Now, remember, it wasn't clear. I only saw like the outline of his face, and I remember his face looked like a Yorkie. Like it was a big snout, and like I could see the hair. But one thing I will never forget is its long fingers and nails. I swear to God, it was like a horror movie. Like he was making the tapping sounds, and I could see how long his nails are. And I remember him pointing at me, so he'd do this, and then point at me, and then he would do this for me to come and open the door for him. Now, that sounds bizarre, but I remember him, I could see him visibly getting upset because I wasn't going to open the door. And I remember shaking my head and being like, no, I'm not going. I felt so scared, like something, I don't know what it was. It just, something was telling me, don't go open that. And I see him start getting frustrated and walking back and forth. So he would like walk that way, past the window, walk that way, past the. So start pacing around, and then he'd stop at the door again at that little window, and start tapping again, and would just continue to point and have point down for me to open the door. I remember that my parents said that I woke them up. I was screaming. That I kept saying that there was a dog man. There's a dog man outside the window. My dad thought it was a man, like trying to lure me outside. And so he hopped on the roof that is like right by that window where my sister's at. And no one seen anything. So my mom had to calm me down. She said that she went back to bed. She put me back to bed. But I remember like the lights going on, and he wasn't there anymore. As soon as the lights go off, everybody falls back to sleep. He starts tapping again, and he's there again. I remember I was so petrified that I slept with the covers over my head, and I woke up the next morning. And apparently, I wasn't the only family member who has seen this dog man on the property. 2 other people that I know in my family, like distant relatives, have also seen what this creature was, and they actually seen it, like its face. To this day, I don't know what the fuck it was. I don't know if it's like, it just felt, whatever it was, it felt ancient. I don't know what it was. But if I close my eyes, I can put myself back there, and I remember vividly what he was doing, how he was pacing, how he looked, those nails, the fingers. It was something like Pennywise would do. I have not stayed in that property in like 20 plus years, but yeah. If anybody knows what it was, what it possibly may be, let me know.
Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2011, early November. It was around 0300, and I was on stag, standing in the Sanger, looking out at the quiet countryside dimly lit by the full moon. For the non-Brits out there, Sanger is just our nickname for one of those small, squat guard towers. It was just 16 of us out there in this small patrol base, surrounded by HESCO barriers, a few Sangers, and a small camera system looking out into the dead ground. And just off to the side of the patrol base was the burn pits, a 6-foot metal crate filled with, you know what, human waste. The thing was like a magnet for some of the local wildlife, namely stray dogs. So when I heard something rummaging around in there one night, I initially didn't think much of it. Still, the more I listened, the more I felt something was off. In my mind, it starts sounding less like a dog sniffing around for some grub and more like someone sifting through the trash as if looking for something. I couldn't see anything from my position on either night vision or thermals, so I radioed the ops room to see if they could have a look on their cameras, but even they came up empty. So, erring on the side of caution, I sent up a mini flare. If it was a dog, the flare would scare it off. If it was Taliban or some super ambitious hobo, well, I reckon we'd figure it out from there. It burst overhead, lighting up the burn pit and a small patch of the countryside in this eerie, flickering green light. And that is when I shit myself. At first, all I could make out was the shape of this tall guy, hunched over the middle of the pit. Well, I thought it was a guy, until it stood upright and looked up at the Sanger straight at me. The boys in the op room saw it through their cameras and were asking me, "Do you have eyes on? Who is that?" But I honestly had no idea how to describe this thing staring at me. Before I could say anything, it hops out of the burn pit, drops down on all fours, and just runs off into the dead ground. Scared the absolute out of me. Listen, I was no stranger to the many wild dogs running around Helmand. This was not that. Whatever I saw definitely had the head and ears of a dog, but it was far leaner. And it definitely wasn't a man because, well, a man doesn't run on all fours like an animal. So it must have been a dog, right? But even after all these years, I'm not entirely convinced that it was. Because one small detail that I haven't mentioned yet, it was wearing clothes.
What I could see if I saw any signs of anything, for the future. I looked up on a ridge to my left. I looked up, and I thought that I saw something move really fast between the trees, and the trees there are very dense. This is the deep woods I'm talking about. This isn't like you're coming to Nashville and they say, oh, this is camping, and you're 5 minutes from Nashville. No, this was in the Blue Ridge, right up on the state line of Georgia, going up out of the state of Tennessee. And I looked and I saw it, and it was brown, but it wasn't real dark brown. It was, I don't know, maybe about 5 foot, 5.5 foot tall, but broad shouldered, and it was hairy. And I couldn't get a good look at it. It was up on the ridge. There was a lot of trees, but my dogs were going crazy.
Whether the legends are true or not, I stand by what I believe I saw that night was flesh and blood. But from what I'm told, these things can manifest as flesh and blood, and then they become ethereal at will. So that's why, I had the arguments with people who were just like, they're flesh and blood, and that's all there is to it. Well, some of the people that have seen them around my hometown will tell you that they're flesh and blood, and the others will tell you that they're not. They'll tell you that they are spirits.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, though. Even if they were, why would you risk it? Why would you risk having just half knowledge, I mean, just have a speculation of, have a belief of, anything is possible. Because you're not an expert on this subject. There's not a group that you can study, in depth. You can't, there's no way to study the entire species in a way that would give you conclusive, evidence. So the only thing you can do is believe, from my experience, this is what has happened. But I can't speak for all dogmen on this subject like that. So, I mean, that's why we're very open of we don't know. So it could be either way.
You guys got to hear this crazy dogman encounter. There's a guy who was in the National Guard, and he was close to the Matches Trace in Mississippi. And he was on his way one day, and it was at night, and he was driving, and he noticed what he thought was a cow off in the distance. So he said that he came around a corner, and this cow kept getting bigger, and next thing you know, it looked like a dog. And then he said the next thing you know, as he was driving by this thing, he noticed it had a head and a long snout. This thing stood up, and he saw its claw reach around a tree, pull itself up, and he took off out of there. Really scared him, freaked him out. He didn't know what to do, but he came back home, and he lived about 10 miles from where this happened. And he said that one night he heard this bipedal creature outside the door of his house, and it absolutely freaked him out. He could hear it breathing outside his window. Said he made himself go to sleep because he didn't know what else to do. But his grandpa was living with him at the time, and he got up the next morning, and his grandpa asked him, he said, hey, did you happen to notice anything weird around the house? I was up last night, and I saw this black creature outside of the house. He didn't know what it was, but it was lurking around the outside of the house. So he gets in his car, and he doesn't know what to do, and his dad calls him. He said, son, are you okay? And he said, yeah, Dad, I'm fine. And he goes, why? He said, about midnight, 11:30 midnight, God woke me up and told me to pray for you. So I was making sure you was okay. He said, Dad, that's the exact time. And he told him what had happened. It was about the exact time that it happened. I don't know what you do with that stuff. These things got to be more than flesh and blood.
He's got, there's a family of werewolves that comes out, and I can see them in the pasture sometimes. They come out from the wood line and kind of walk around, and then they go back in. And I said, Shane, a family of werewolves? He goes, oh, yeah, they're always out there. I said, really? I said, are you sure they're werewolves? How do you know they're werewolves? She goes, well, I see them. They have long noses, and they're standing up, and they're walking around, and there's 2 or 3 or 4 of them, and they come in and out, and they never come up to the house. They never bothered me, but I was like, huh. No, I was really kind of surprised because she was like the sweetest, like school marm. But when she goes, "Oh yeah, absolutely, the family of werewolves," I was like, "The what?" And
wow, all right.
And she just and I was like, "Are you serious?" She goes, "Oh yeah, oh yeah." I mean, I see them like maybe 2 or 3 times a year, but they're out there. I said, "Huh? I just leave them alone. They leave me alone."
We're too focused on aliens and UFOs under the term disclosure. Disclosure just simply means unveiling.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that we may see the government try to use disclosure and aliens and UFOs to distract us from the true disclosure that's coming, and that is God opening the eyes to the body of Christ, the true body, to see the spirit realm, which these giants that you're talking about, that's sort of been in hiding. I would not be surprised if all of a sudden we see people sharing viral videos, clear images, not blurry images, but clear images of Bigfoot, of Dogman, of monsters, of hideous things that we only ever saw blurry pictures of. All of a sudden they're clear, so clear that people be like, that's got to be AI. Mm-hmm. That's got to be AI. That can't even be real. And then all of a sudden one walks into a neighborhood and starts ravaging the neighborhood. But we're all worried about, did they come from other planets? But the enemy is going to know, hey, this is my last shot. I've held these beings back. I've been in hiding because I didn't want to be exposed, but I got one last generation. Why in the world would you preserve a giant in the mountain of Kandahar, Afghanistan, just to have a giant in a cave up there?
My pet.
He's just my pet. He's just, it's just a great story. No, listen, the devil, I hate him. I hate his guts, but he is very cunning and very sinister. And let me tell you something about the devil. Here's where the church messes up about the devil. We're all just like this. We want everything done like this. The devil is long game. The devil plays the long game. So in my opinion, he's holding some of these things in these caves for such a time as this. And when the great disclosure comes, it's going to be so chaotic. Y'all, and I'm not trying to scare everybody to death, because to the believer, we know this is coming. Jesus said to the disciples, listen, you don't get it. In fact, I'm telling you, how awesome is this? He's like, I'm telling you, I'm answering your question, but I am really not answering it for you. Let that sink in. I'm answering. You asked the question right here in front of me, friend to friend, you asked me. And my answer is for you so that you can write it down. But it's not for you. The answer that I'm going to give you to your question is for a generation that's going to exist thousands of years later.
Yeah.
But I need you to hear me. How awesome is God that when he was speaking that as an answer to an actual question, he was thinking about us.
It was not just giants that was left out of the rewriting of our history. Many beings once shared this realm with us. The cynocephaly were one of those creatures. The definition of cynocephaly is literally dog-headed being, but there are documented accounts of them from many civilizations the world over, and not just like a Bigfoot myth. It wasn't just depictions of off-handed sightings. There were great details of their livings and even their occasional combat against us. And even one of the most famous saints of them all, Saint Christopher, was depicted many times as a dog-headed cynocephaly saint, though the mainstream says the reason for this depiction was due to a misinterpretation. So essentially, an artist misinterpreted Saint Christopher, and ever since then, they depicted him as a dog-headed saint, because that's definitely how misinterpretations work. As I said, our true history is so distorted, nobody has any clear picture of our true reality. We can only piece together the scraps and hope to form a more complete picture. Question everything, friends.
So let's talk about Dogman for those across the world who are not familiar with these hybrid cryptids. Several historical figures and explorers, including Marco Polo, Christopher Columbus and ancient Greek writers like Ctesias and Megasthenes spoke about encountering or hearing tales of dog-headed people cynocephaly. As early as the 5th century BC, the physician Ctesias wrote a detailed report in his Indica on cynocephaly in India. The traveler Megasthenes also claimed knowledge of mountain-dwelling dog-headed people who communicated by barking and wore animal skins. These and other classical texts like Pliny the Elder's Natural History solidified the belief in these creatures for over 1,000 years in the Western world. Marco Polo describes the inhabitants of the Andaman Islands Andamanane as having heads just like big mastiff dogs and being a most cruel generation that ate anyone they could catch who was not of their own race. Giovanni da Pian del Carpine mentioned dog-headed people while traveling through the lands of the Mongol Empire. Franciscan monk Doric of Pordenone claimed to have encountered a more sophisticated dog-man society on the island of Nicovera, where they had a king and a religion. Christopher Columbus reported that the native Taino people told him stories of dog-headed canina in the Caribbean. The famous Ottoman map, presented to Sultan Selim I in 1517, included an image of a dog-headed man in what is now Colombia. All of the people mentioned gave authentic statements and always stood by their claims.
Larry's never been in the military. He's got a good buddy. They do a lot of stuff in the North Carolina mountains. I think his buddy has a place up there. And he's telling the story of a time when he and his buddy had bought some gear and they were going to go into the forest kind of across the street, and not deep into the forest or anything like that, just to try out their gear. And they got nods, they got, night vision, they got some pretty snazzy weapons and some communications gear. They're looking pretty sharp. They're just going to go step into the woods and see how it all works. Mm-hmm. So as they're about to cross the highway and step into the woods, they hear a gunshot go off down here. This is out in the country, so that's not unusual. But then they get into the woods, or they're into the woods, they hear another shot. So they just take off running. They don't know, because it's not their land across the street. So is this a landowner shooting at us? What is happening here? Why? And the second shot sounded closer. So they take off running. And they run for a bit, and then they stop to rest, and they get down on one knee. And they're looking around, just kind of talking, maybe getting a drink of water. They got their nods on. His buddy has an illuminator on his, an IR illuminator on his weapon. And Larry's got the nods on. And Larry's just kind of looking forward. And this guy's sweeping with that illuminator. When he comes across, Larry sees what we now describe as a dogman standing there. And he said it was huge. I mean, he describes a huge thing really close to them. They didn't know what it was. They didn't stick around to see what it was. They didn't pop off any rounds. They just took off. That's pretty much the story. The interesting thing is this. We're at Moores Creek Battlefield filming because Tyler comes driving down this road right where Moores Creek Battlefield is. And as he crosses the Black River, that's where he has his incident. Right? Really close to Moores Creek Battlefield. Larry's event was less than a mile away.
Wow.
Back this way is the Conjuring House used in the film.
Really?
Which we just did an episode on.
Jeez.
You could almost throw a rock from the Conjuring House to these three places, all tied together with the Black River.
A lot of SS officers had these really nasty scars upon their face, right? And the narrative that they'll try to tell you is that they got these scars, fencing, with the little short blades, the little skinny blades. And when they got hit in the face, they would take straw and pack this straw in there, and because they wanted a big nasty scar on their face. That's true. They were actually doing that. That's not debatable, right? But there's also another fringe element to this, saying that, and this is also a fact, only SS officers were allowed to go into this Black Forest and hunt in Austria. But the rumor is that they were going there, they were hunting werewolves. And what they were doing is they wanted to get bit by one of these werewolves so they could get the abilities that they had. And this was how Germany or soldiers, whatever, developed their first super soldier program.
Catherine Cross. Killed by human wolves.
Okay.
Now, Catherine Cross, I believe this is like 1610. On Catherine Cross's tombstone, it says, killed by human wolves. Her husband was adamant that people who transformed into wolves killed his wife. The autopsy was horrendous. They couldn't explain how the body got in such conditions. He went to his grave. They said he was crazy. He went to his grave screaming that human wolves killed his wife. You can pull this right up. Why is this man saying this?
I don't do this often at all. I could probably count on my hands how many times I brought this up, because it's really kind of a fringe area of deliverance. But anyway, I went into this whole thing about werewolves.
Okay.
And this guy's, he scoots up on the edge of his chair. And I thought, this boy is listening hard. And so I just unpacked it, and I said, sometimes people ask me, well, where's that in the Bible? So let me show you. I said, the Holy Watchers cursed Nebuchadnezzar, and he turned into a beast. He went on all fours for 7 years.
Yeah.
And his hair grew out the length of eagle's feathers, all of his body, and his fingernails grew out the length of eagle's claws.
Yes.
Now that we have a biblical account of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the curse was lifted, and he transmogrified back into King Nebuchadnezzar.
Mm-hmm.
And in one of the greatest comebacks of human history, they let him be king again. I mean, that's a mind bender, right?
That really is.
That's a mind bender.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I told this story, and then we broke for lunch, and he's just standing at the back. I thought, this guy has had some kind of an experience with a weird beast or somebody in his family.
Yeah.
I went up to him. I said, hello, what's your name? He says, Professor Wolf. No joke. Wow. And I said, Professor Wolf. He said, yeah. I said, what's your first name? He told me. I won't disclose it here because,
this will be seen by hopefully millions of people.
Yeah. But anyway, he told me his name, and I said, your first name does not sound American. Your last name does. And I'm wondering how that happened. He said, well, our name was so-and-so, 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 but my mother changed it to Wolf when we immigrated into America. So, I'm already thinking, this isn't just by chance that she chose the name Wolf. She could have chosen Jones or Smith. Right?
Yeah. Really want to fit in? Choose Smith.
Yeah, right. So anyway, he said, do you believe that story? And I said, absolutely. And he said, do you think it still happens? I said, I know it still happens. And he said, we need to talk. I said, we are talking. Do you mean we need to pray? He says, yeah, we probably need to pray, but not here. And so we went to our room. He told me a story of how his grandmother was a witch, and that they lived by the Russian border, and the Russian soldiers would come over and rape and pillage and plunder. They couldn't do anything about it. So she had him do a ritual to invite a weird spirit into him that would be triggered by anger or fear. So if he got, you remember the Incredible Hulk?
Yeah.
Like he would say, you're making me angry. You don't want to see me when I'm angry, right?
Yeah.
It was about transmogrification, right? The whole series was about that. So anyway, the long and short of it is, he told me all the story of how it happened and how he had lived with that for years. And he was now a professor in an Ivy League college. I said, how does that work with having a weird spirit? He says, I don't get mad. He said, people make fun of me, but if something's, I can feel it start to happen. He said, I'll just grab my briefcase and head for home. And so anyway, we were able to get him free of that.
There were categories of Christian mysticism. St. Augustine would have been considered a Christian mystic and actually a nature mystic. And so he would actually talk to the animals. There was a town that was being haunted by a demon possessed wolf. And this town was just being ravaged by this wolf.
Dogman, yeah.
Yeah. And so they had Augustine come in. And the story, or legend, if you will, says that he comes in and then he walks out and he sees the wolf and he approaches the wolf. And it's such an awesome story. He addresses the wolf as brother. And he says, "Brother Wolf."
The Paris, Tennessee Dogman incident. In the early hours of a summer night in 1996, a woman living alone on a small Tennessee farm began hearing her goats bleating in panic. The sound was unusual, frantic, uneven, and punctuated by something heavier moving in the dark. She stepped onto her porch and scanned the yard. The floodlight caught movement near her barn, a tall, upright figure, broad at the shoulders, with the unmistakable silhouette of something canine-shaped, yet standing like a man. Startled, she retreated inside and called 911. The dispatcher later noted her voice was calm, sober, and unnervingly certain about what she'd seen. "It's big," she said, "and it's walking on 2 legs. 2 Henry County deputies arrived minutes later. The woman met them outside, still clutching an unloaded .22 rifle. She told them she could hear it breathing somewhere near the shed. When the deputies moved toward the livestock pen, their flashlights revealed 2 goats lying motionless. Their throats had been torn open, clean, deep wounds no local predator typically produced. Then they noticed the tracks. Large impressions, over 15 inches long, ran through the dirt with elongated toes and a digitigrade heel structure. The stride was too long for a human, too defined for a bear. One deputy crouched beside them and muttered, "This isn't right. This isn't anything I know." As they circled the shed, their beams climbed up the wooden slats where deep claw marks gouged the siding nearly 7 feet high. 4 parallel slashes had cut through the outer layer of wood. That's when they heard it. A deep, rhythmic breathing, slow, controlled, deliberate. It came from the tree line. Not moving, just watching. One of the deputies shined his light toward the sound and froze. 2 yellow eyes reflected back at him from human height. A tall, canine-headed figure shifted between the trees, its outline unmistakable. He raised his voice. "Sheriff's Department, show yourself." The response was a low, resonant growl that vibrated the air. From the porch, the woman cried out, "That's it. That's what I saw." The creature stepped back into shadow, dropped smoothly to all fours, and in a single burst of speed sprinted into the woods, silent and controlled. Within seconds, it disappeared into the darkness. When dawn arrived, the woman found more tracks circling her property. The rocks and debris disturbed around the shed confirmed something powerful had moved through the night. Off the record, one deputy admitted, "I've hunted all my life. I've never seen anything that moved like that." Shaken and deeply unsettled, the woman sold her remaining livestock, installed stronger lights, and eventually moved away from the property. She never altered her story, repeating the same details until the end of her life in that community. Both deputies maintained privately that the events of that night did not match any known wildlife in Tennessee.
This werewolf account was sent to me by a follower. It's absolutely terrifying, and I will be showing pictures that was sent to me. This guy was said that in the beginning of 2025, he was going through one of the darkest periods of his life, barely sleeping, anxiety through the roof, and just mentally drained. And he said during that time, he started reading about strange encounters, specifically cryptids and supernatural stuff. And one thing kept coming up over and over again for him. And people that had these experiences claim that these things show themselves when you're at your most vulnerable. And he brushed it off at first until around January 4th. It was around 4 a.m. and his dog woke him up to go outside. And she was almost 16 years old at the time. She was sweet, but according to him, she had incredible instincts, even though she was a little on the older side. The second they stepped outside, she froze in her tracks. She wasn't barking. She wasn't growling. She was just staring and dead focused down the street, and her eyes were locked on something. And he immediately noticed something felt wrong. Not like scary movie wrong, more like a real sense of danger wrong. He said the entire neighborhood was silent, no wind, no insects, no distant traffic. He said there was nothing. He said it was so quiet, it actually made him nauseous. Now, his dog, Lily, usually rushed back inside at night if something scared her, but this time she slowly walked further down the sidewalk and without ever taking her eyes off of whatever it was that she was looking at. And that's what freaked him out the most, he said. She wasn't even watching where she was walking. He said she was just staring the whole time. Her head never moved. So now, naturally, he's focused too on whatever she's looking at. So he looks down the block and notices that she's locked onto this massive tree near the middle of the street. And at first he doesn't, see anything there, but he can feel that someone or something is watching them. When you just feel like something's looking at you. He said every instinct in his body started screaming that something was wrong. So he unclips the safety on his gun, and he usually carries it when he goes out walking with his dog. And his dog finally stops to go to the bathroom, but while she's doing her business, she keeps looking at him with those like nervous eyes that dogs give you when like they feel scared or vulnerable, and like pretty much saying like, hey, I want you to protect me. And then he saw it, whatever it was. He said it was this massive shape. It was pressed against the tree. And at first he thought it was just some guy standing there watching them being a creep. But the longer that he stared, the more he realized that this thing, whatever it was trying to be seen. And it slowly shifted behind the trunk when he noticed it. And that made him kind of angry more than scared at first, but he thought maybe it was some creep or prowler messing around in the neighborhood. So he just started walking towards it. And that's when everything changed, the whole mood and everything. Because as he got closer to it, he realized that the top of the shadow sticking out above the tree line wasn't branches. He said that they were ears, pointed ears, like dog ears. And whatever this thing was, he said it was massive. Now, he said he's around 5'6", 5'7", and this thing easily had to be over 7-8 feet tall, just standing there by the tree. And then he saw its hand wrap around the trunk, and he said it wasn't a paw. He said it was a human hand with long fingers and claws. And he said the second that he saw that, every ounce of anger that he had disappeared, and it turned into pure panic. And he grabbed his dog and they ran back to the house. And he said the worst part is he kind of realized while he was running back that whatever this thing is, he's leading it right to his home. So he was like, probably not the best idea. But anyway, he said when he got back to his front door, he looked back and this shadow thing was standing there watching them. And he said it wasn't chasing, but he said it advanced on them so fast. So he eventually collapsed on the floor inside holding his dog. And he said his dog was whimpering and crying. But that wasn't the end of it. Over the next several months, strange things kept happening around that same area. And one night, he heard growls and weird grunting noises out near the woods behind his house. And his dog would stop dead in her tracks during their walks as usual, and she would suddenly refuse to go any further. And then one night around midnight, while he was bent over picking up after her, this massive black figure just flew past them in the street. And he said he knows that it wasn't a car, it wasn't a bike. He said it was just this giant black blur that was moving impossibly fast. And then not even 10 seconds later, from around the corner, they heard these brakes screech, and this man got out of his car and yelled, "What the hell was that?" And looked at him, and they looked at each other, and he was like, "Did you see that?" And then the guy got back in his car and he just sped off. And another night, a police officer stopped him while he was walking his dog. And, he asked him if he had seen a really large black dog running loose in the neighborhood, because they'd gotten multiple calls about whatever this was frightening people. And he said the way that the officer said it really bothered him, because it wasn't like he was asking about a normal dog call, right? Then his neighbors started hearing things as well. Heavy crashing sounds in the woods, getting into the garbage, branches were snapping, something large was moving around at night. And his neighbor was an EMT and a firefighter and is someone that's accustomed to sketchy situations. But eventually, even he admitted that something was out there and something was wrong. And then one night around 3-4 in the morning, that same neighbor claimed that he finally saw whatever this thing was. He was outside with his dogs when they suddenly started growling towards the woods, and he watched this massive black figure climb a tree with unnatural speed and then leap 20 feet into another tree without losing balance. And he said it stopped, tilted its head down towards them, and watched them. The dogs absolutely lost it, and they ran inside themselves. And later on that same night, both of them heard this howl echo through the neighborhood. And they said they know for a fact it wasn't a dog, it wasn't a coyote. He described it as sounding like a wolf mixed with a human scream type of howl. And then a few hours later, around 3 in the morning, whatever, something slammed violently into the railing outside this guy's house. And he said it was hard enough to shake the metal and break it. And he was too terrified to look outside. But the next morning, decorations were knocked over in its nearby yards, and part of the heavy stone wall across the street had collapsed, like something enormous stepped directly on it and knocked it all over. Now, moving on, around Halloween night, him and one of his other friends heard this howl again. And this time his friend just stared at him and said, "So you weren't lying about this?" You know, because he was mentioning it to a couple of people in the neighborhood and they were like kind of iffy about it. You know, now, whether you believe in werewolves or not, something was out there with them that year. And whatever it was, his dog knew before any human did.
Guys, I am believing more and more Dogman is real. So first it started off as a 911 call where a man is claiming that there is a creature that looks like Slender Man in the back of his truck in North Carolina. And then the same person who interviewed him interviewed another guy who had a very similar incident in the woods last year, but was like a dog man. And it was only like a mile away from the same thing where the guy saw the Slender Man. I hadn't really looked into Dogman, but guys, after I posted that video, there were quite a few of you who had said that you experienced Dogman. In fact, James sent me this picture today. Like, that's wild. And that is in the mountains of Virginia. And I've been kind of doing research, and really, Dogman has been around for a real long time. And I think I know who might be the Dogman in the woods in North Carolina. Now, and the reason I'm going to say what this particular entity is because it is in Morse Creek battlefield area where Civil War, a lot of bloodshed, horror, conjurings over that way too. Let's start off with Egypt. Anubis is the god of death or of judgment, bringing people to judgment. Head of a jackal or dog, body of kind of like a human, but really structured and chiseled, if you will. I have a feeling that's what people are seeing in North Carolina. Just my thought. But that's not the only place. Like in Christianity, there is a Saint Christopher who has the head of a dog. Yeah. And then in China, they have very old texts and stuff like that that has where there were men with dog heads. And then Marco Polo, yes, that is a real guy, not just a pool game. But he said that he experienced like a battle with men that had dog heads. There's even in literature in India and Greece of talk about humans with dog heads. Let alone here in the United States, we've had people from Michigan, Tennessee, North Carolina, Florida, all claiming to have seen
and also
the Dogman. Now, it's actually called cynocephalus, where basically it is the head of a dog and the body of like a man. And that is what has been talked about in text for a very long time. So when we're hearing, stories, fairy tales, right, and fictional movies talk about these different kinds of creatures, guys, I'm just convinced these are documentaries. Okay, that they're talking about real stuff. And I am going to say that not everybody is on something when they experience seeing stuff. I'm just going to say that. Not everybody can be. And there might be some, but not everybody. I mean, what do you think?
My intentions are to get you prepared for what's next and also prepare you to survive. If you look at the scripture, Luke 21, where it says men's heart will fail in the last days, well, here are a few things that are the reasons men's heart will fail. I want you to be able to, as you watch these videos, to ask the questions that you need to ask and research the things you're afraid to research.
Check this footage out here, y'all. So this was captured on a game trail camera. As you can see, this deer here was captured on camera, and you're going to see some more deer that was captured on camera. But the strange thing is, you're going to see this black figure start to emerge from the back. Just keep watching. You see this deer turns and look. These deer here are just looking around. But keep watching. Here it goes. Check it out. As you can see, he's right there and he walks over this way. He pans over that way. Check him out, you guys. This was recorded in the background. See that black figure? It looks like he's walking on 2 feet. And this was recorded on a game trail camera, you guys. Run it back one more time so you can see him. Check it out. Step 1, step 2. And he just cruises over. They're out there, you guys. Be careful.
Vou ver que se o galinha tudo certo. Opa. Opa.
People, if you're driving this time of night, keep your eye on those shoulders. Folks are saying they've seen eyes glowing in the dark and something tall, canine, standing upright just beyond the tree line. I don't know if this is a hoax or not, but if you're headed north tonight, I'd keep those doors locked and the high beams ready. Dogman sightings are picking up all across Michigan. First near Elk Rapids, out by Short's Brewing Facility, and now reports are coming in from as far south as the Ambassador Bridge.
Oh, are you reading me? Come in. Hello?
Thank you for watching. If these Dogman encounters sent a chill down your spine, make sure to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments below. As always, stay safe, stay aware, question everything, and remember, out there in those woods, something might be watching.